talk about.
Folks are mad at government. Folks are mad at government, boy. Frustration at an all-time high since that sort of thing started to be measured. NSA, police, Veterans Administration, Congress. We operate with an understanding that if we criticize loudly enough, exercise our small d democratic power, then things can improve. But what if a substantial portion of a solution might be the opposite of that, or something close to the opposite of that? Stay tuned to the end, because there'll be a little bit of a surprise ending. I was, as a very small child, a terrible student. I couldn't finish my work. I was in the lowest reading group. I couldn't sit still. My first grade teacher had 5 manila envelopes on the wall, each filled with an assignment, dittos. And if you could finish the first 4, you could do the 5th one, and the 5th ditto was a fun one, like coloring or connect the dots. Not a single time in first grade did I ever get to the 5th ditto. Yeah. Finally, in 3rd grade, I found a teacher who liked me. Her name was Lydia Larson. She was athletic and had a powerful voice. She played softball and kickball, and after recess told us to plant our fannies and grow roots. There was once a rumor that went on that she once hit a kid with a chalkboard eraser without even turning around and got him square in the forehead. And she took extra time. I wasn't allowed to eat sugar as a kid on account of the hyper. And she introduced me to the other kid in class who couldn't eat sugar, and then made sure our parents connected, so that when there was a party in the classroom for Valentine's Day or Halloween, and everybody was eating candy and cake, we could have cantaloupe melon. Now, cantaloupe melon sucked compared to candy and cake, but compared to nothing at all, it was pretty good. Eventually, my school closed a year later, and I had to transfer. And by fluke, she transferred to the same school, and by some other fluke, she became my 5th grade teacher. She became the source of stability in my life. I was a sad kid. I had headaches all the time. I was getting to know my 3rd step-parent. My first step-parent had hit me a little more than she should have. I was shuttling back and forth between California and Oregon. But Lydia Larson was still my teacher. And I could get to the 5th ditto. About 14 years later, I had finished law school, and I was clerking for a federal judge, and we were stationed, and we were sitting in Pasadena, by coincidence, just miles away from where Lydia Larson lived. And so I looked her up in the phone book, which was like a search engine, but it was heavier, and Facebook couldn't use it to get your browser history. And she remembered me, and I took her to lunch. And I told her my story. And I told her that I just finished near the top of my class from a fancy law school. I told her about my job. I told her that I still had made mistakes and had a hard time sitting still, but that I had learned to love learning and occasionally could excel at it, and that none of that would have happened but for her. And she started to cry. So I'd succeeded. And I gave her a crystal trophy. It was actually made out of acrylic. And it said, Lydia Larson, best teacher I ever had. And we hugged. It was the first time I'd ever hugged her when I was bigger than she was. A few years ago, several years after that, she came to visit Oregon and came over to the state capitol. She got to see where I worked, and she got a chance to sit in the governor's desk. And it felt really great. She was older, less athletic. Might have felt good for her, but it felt really good for me. So one time I went a little bit out of my way to express gratitude to somebody who in the course of their sometimes thankless job changed my life. And I've sort of patted myself on the back for it ever since. But then I started counting up how many teachers I'd had. From kindergarten all the way through graduate school, I had at least 111 teachers, not counting summer school, not counting TAs or substitutes. One acrylic trophy. was my dog. Learning about the internet. And that's teachers. I don't think I'm much worse at thanking teachers than other people have been, but that's teachers. People love teachers. What about the person or people who paved the roads that got me here this morning? What about the people who keep the park clean so that I can go and take my dog there and keep the poopy bag dispenser filled with poopy bags because I always forget the poopy bags? What about my postal worker? I've never had a piece of mail lost that I actually mailed. I think most mail that gets lost is the mail that doesn't get put in the mail. What about my garbage collector, who comes every week and picks up my waste? Never has left a single piece of garbage in the front if it's overfilled, if the lid isn't quite on, if there's something leaning against the side. Goes home smelling of my filth. I've never even met the guy. I'm not even sure it's a guy. We all have a stake in how well public services are delivered, whether it's Social Security or Medicare or clean air or clean water or wait times, the Department of Motor Vehicles, or teachers, not just for our kids or us, but for a neighbor's kids or a future coworker's kids. Firefighters, Veterans administration. Does positive feedback matter? A guy named John Gottman did a series of studies on marriage. And his finding was that if a marriage is going to be successful, it needs at least 5 positive interactions, 5 positive emotions for every 1 negative. Tennessee education system teaches their teachers to give 4 pieces of praise for every 1 reprimand. I got the same rule of thumb from a seasoned manager when it was pretty clear I was too hard on my team. It's sort of hard to come up with a magical ratio, 3-to-1, 11-to-1, applying math to human interaction. But what study after study shows is that the most valuable feedback that can be given is positive, specific feedback when it's deserved. There's a barrier to this in government. It's a collective action problem. Now imagine somebody plans your wedding or builds your house. You pay them. If they do a good job, you say thank you, maybe give them a bottle of wine. But what if the person that does the building is building roads or a water system or a postal system or a school that a lot of people use a little bit, that a lot of people share a little bit of benefit? Whose job is it to thank that person? What mechanism for appreciation do we have? Is it sufficient? There are also rules. We don't want law enforcement or the Postal Service to deliver better or worse based on the receipt of a bribe. There are not the same kind of limits on receiving negative feedback, however. The Press, Freedom of Information Act requests. There's a risk-taking problem with unclear rewards for taking risks, but clear punishment for failing in risks. With all-time high anger at government, that certainly gets through to people who are doing the work. They express themselves. Talk radio has made an industry out of it. I helped pass a bill on budget transparency. It put on the interwebs the state workforce, who gets paid what the state budget is, what revenues are, some about indicators for how the state is doing. You know what it didn't have? Successes. There isn't a listing of times when somebody goes above and beyond the call of duty, when somebody innovates. And if in fact you look and compare income relative to education, work environment, public opinion, stress levels, public sector service jobs tend to be a pretty big bulk of the most thankless jobs. So how does this lie alongside morale? Looking at federal workers rate their job satisfaction, about half of them rate their job satisfaction a 3 out of 10 or lower. The people who rate it a 1 out of 10 is about the same number of people who rate it 7, 8, 9, or 10 combined. Military does it a little bit better. It doesn't solve all morale problems, but imagine military service without regular, institutionalized, and also public expressions of gratitude. A liberal friend might say, but what about Ferguson? We've got to criticize police officers if they apply force, enforce the law in racially biased ways. Yes. But if you want to improve performance, shouldn't we also hold out examples of officers who get out of their cars, who know the names of the people in the neighborhood, who know the names of the people experiencing homelessness, who know how to de-escalate conflict? My conservative friends, screw those government workers. They're lazy. If they want to get thanked more, they can find another job. But as a manager, if you were giving somebody a paycheck and the only thing you gave them was a paycheck and negative feedback, do you think you'd be getting the most you could out of that paycheck? And if you went with that plan, well, we'll just replace them, is that really a good idea when we know that a new worker can cost 1.5 times in terms of training and getting up to speed of what that last worker cost? To my government reformer friends who say, wait, what about budgets? This says nothing, and you're right, this says nothing and doesn't resolve the conversations about modernizing systems, technology, what the proper functions of government are, compensation, etc. But how well are proposals for reform when they come across as a tax? How much traction do those get? What if instead of starting with screw you, change you, we started with thank you? If we use George Bush'ism of it's the people's money, well, why don't we do the best we can to spend that money as best that we can? And if we take that further, it's our money and those folks work for us. We need to be better managers. We need to be better leaders. We get the government we deserve, and we need to work to deserve better. People have seen this line before. They've heard it. Maybe you've said it. I pay your salary. What if every once in a while, when it was deserved, so thanks for doing it right? I'm not saying to criticize less. That's not just a right, that's a duty in a democracy. I'm saying we need to compliment more. I tried this one time in my adult life. I was representing one of the poorest districts in Portland, and I was pissed about the underinvestment and the cycle of disinvestment in East Portland. Not enough sidewalks, not enough parks. And one day the Parks Department launched a new initiative to build new parks, led by a city councilor. Now, I took a break from my grumpiness and I sent a gift basket. I don't think I violated any ethics laws. And the interesting part was not that. The interesting part was that I heard a rumor back. I said, oh, he's not just pissed, he actually cares. What was notable was that it was notable. So how should we thank? I leave that to some degree to you. I've been scoping around for different things people do. Some families leave stuff at the end of the year. Some people try to have a rule that every time they do a criticism, they make sure they find another opportunity when it's deserved to deliver a compliment. One of my favorite examples is done by a local group who recognizes a local government worker and calls them the Nope of the Week. And here's the little secret. Gratitude is powerful. It can increase happiness like a pay raise, but can last longer. It can improve sleep habits. It can improve health. It can lower blood pressure. That gratitude is good for the giver. And that's the surprise ending. That expressing gratitude to public service workers, the people who deliver service, is not for them. It's for you. Thankless jobs. Maybe they shouldn't be. And maybe if they weren't, our democracy would work a little bit better, and maybe we'd be a little happier.